At 24,000 feet, an explosion rips through the tail of Japan Airlines Flight 123. A storm of warnings and lights erupts inside the cockpit. For the next 32 minutes, the crew of JAL 123 would perform one of the most remarkable feats of airmanship in history, battling to fly an aircraft that was unflyable. At the conclusion of World War II, Japan's aviation industry was dismantled under Allied occupation. The country was prohibited from designing, manufacturing, or operating aircraft, and for several years, had no independent civil aviation capability or international flag carrier. In 1951, following the restoration of sovereignty, the re-establishment of a national airline became a strategic priority. Beyond commercial necessity, it represented economic reintegration and political normalization on the global stage. Japan Airlines was formed in 1951 as a private entity and in 1953 reorganized under the Japan Airlines Company Act as a government-owned flag carrier. It became a central instrument of Japan's post-war recovery and international presence. By the 1980s, the airline had developed an extensive long-haul network and maintained a strong operational and safety reputation. The aircraft for Flight 123 was a Boeing 747SR, registration JA8119. The 747, dubbed the Queen of the Skies, was the undisputed icon of the jet age. The short-range variant, or SR, was a workhorse specifically designed for Japan's high-density domestic routes. Capable of carrying over 500 passengers on short hops between cities. This particular airframe was 11 years old and had flown more than 25,000 hours. In command was 49-year-old Captain Masami Takahama, a highly experienced captain qualified on the Boeing 747 and responsible for training other pilots on the aircraft. With over 12,400 flight hours, he knew the jumbo jet inside and out. He was joined by 39-year-old First Officer Yutaka Sasaki, an experienced co-pilot who was progressing through training on his way to earning his captain's command. In the third seat was 46-year-old flight engineer Hiroshi Fukuda, the crew system specialist responsible for monitoring and managing the aircraft systems, including engines, pressurization, electrical, and hydraulic operations. On Monday, 12th of August 1985, the air in Tokyo is thick with summer heat. But more than that, it's thick with anticipation. It is the eve of Obon, a traditional Japanese Buddhist festival where families travel across the country to honor the spirits of their ancestors. At Haneda Airport, the terminal is operating at peak capacity. Japan Airlines Flight 123, scheduled from Tokyo to Osaka, is fully booked. All passenger seats are occupied with a mixed manifest of business travelers, families, and students departing ahead of the holiday period. As the crew completes their pre-flight checks, everything is routine. The weather is clear, the flight plan is simple. A 54-minute journey southwest. At 1812, with 500 passengers and 15 crew members aboard, JA8119 lumbers onto the runway. The four massive Pratt & Whitney engines spool up with a deafening roar, and the jumbo jet hurtles into the evening sky. For the first 12 minutes, the flight is perfectly normal. The seatbelt sign is turned off, and in the cabin, flight attendants begin preparing for drink service. At 1824, while climbing through 24,000 feet over Sagami Bay, the unthinkable happens. Without warning, a catastrophic failure tears the aircraft apart. Inside the plane, it feels like a bomb has gone off. A powerful wave of explosive decompression rips through the rear of the aircraft. The cabin instantly fills with a thick white fog as the pressurized air inside vents violently into the thin atmosphere outside. Ceiling panels collapse. Oxygen masks drop, dangling before the terrified faces of the passengers. The source of the explosion was the aft pressure bulkhead. A domed metal wall at the very back of the passenger cabin that acts like the end of a soda can, holding the pressure in. It had ruptured. The force of the escaping air blasted into the aircraft's unpressurized tail section with unimaginable power. This devastating force ripped away most of the aircraft's large vertical tail fin and critically severed all four of the redundant hydraulic lines that ran through it. In the cockpit, it was chaos. The pilots are thrown against their harnesses. An alarm for the rear passenger door flashes, leading them to initially suspect a door failure. But the true nature of their problem is far, far worse. First Officer Sasaki grabs the controls. They feel loose, unresponsive. He turns the yoke left, then right. Nothing happens. The largest, most powerful control surfaces on the plane, the elevators on the tail, and the ailerons on the wings are dead. Flight engineer Fukuda scans his panel and confirms their worst nightmare. The gauges for all four hydraulic systems read zero. The lifeblood of the aircraft, the fluid that powers its muscles, has bled out into the sky. Japan Airlines Flight 123 is now a 350-ton glider with no steering. The loss of the vertical stabilizer makes the aircraft inherently unstable. It immediately begins a terrifying roller coaster like oscillation known as a few good cycle. The nose pitches up, and the plane climbs steeply until it loses airspeed and stalls. Then, the nose drops violently and it dives, building up speed until it has enough momentum to pitch up and start the cycle all over again. Each cycle lasts about 90 seconds, subjecting everyone on board to crushing G forces followed by terrifying weightlessness. On the ground, air traffic controllers watch in disbelief as JAL 123 deviates from its course and begins to climb and fall erratically. But the pilots can't explain the full nature of their emergency because no one has ever experienced it before. They are writing the emergency checklist as they go. In an act of incredible airmanship, Captain Takahama and his crew discover their only means of control, the throttles. By applying more power to the engines on one side than the other, they can slowly make the plane turn. By increasing or decreasing overall power, they can influence but not truly control their altitude. In the cabin, the situation is terrifying. The flight attendants, led by Yumi Ochiai, move through the chaotic cabin, calming passengers and instructing them on emergency procedures. As the minutes stretch on and the plane continues its violent bucking, a grim realization sets in. Many passengers, believing these are their final moments, begin to write farewell notes issue on scraps of paper, on air sickness bags, and in notebooks, delivering their final messages of love and final goodbye to their families. For 32 minutes, the crew performs miracles. They manage to level the plane out of its dive using only engine thrust and the deployment of landing gear to create drag. They guide the damaged aircraft through a slow, wide bank, turning its course back toward land. They are aiming for Haneda Airport, but also considering a US Air Force base at Yokota as a closer alternative. But they are losing a crucial battle against gravity. With every managed fugue cycle, the aircraft loses height, drawing them towards the treacherous mountains of Ganma Prefecture. At 1856, their luck runs out. As they fight to control another violent dip, a mountain ridge looms in front of them. The pilots apply maximum power, trying to force the nose up one last time. But it's too late. The aircraft's right wing clips a line of trees on the ridge. The impact sends the massive 747 into an uncontrollable right-hand roll. It flips onto its back and plunges, inverted, into the slope of Mount Takamagahara. The crash site is a scene of unimaginable devastation, located in some of the most remote and inaccessible terrain in Japan. A US Air Force C-130 navigator spots the burning wreckage just 20 minutes after the crash and radios the location. In a decision that would later become a source of immense controversy and regret, the American crew is told to stand down and let Japanese authorities handle the rescue. But hampered by darkness, the sheer difficulty of the terrain, and initial confusion about the precise location, Japanese rescue teams do not reach the site until 0900 the next morning, a full 14 hours after the impact. They expect to find no one alive. Amidst the wreckage, they find four survivors, all female, including flight attendant Yumi Ochiai and 12-year-old Keiko Kawakami, who was found wedged in the branches of a tree. Tragically, Miss Ochiai would later recall hearing the sounds of other survivors in the darkness, cries that slowly faded during the long, cold night. Medical experts would later speculate that more might have survived if help arrived sooner. The final death toll was 520, making it and remaining the deadliest single aircraft accident in aviation history. The investigation was swift and intense. The cockpit voice and flight data recorders were recovered. The CVR provided a chilling testament to the crew's professionalism and bravery in the face of an impossible situation. The FDR charted the aircraft's wild, uncontrolled flight path. The key piece of evidence, however, was recovered far from the main crash site, floating in Sagami Bay, a large section of the plane's vertical stabilizer. This discovery confirmed that the plane had begun to break apart in mid-air, long before impact with the mountain. Investigators now understood what had happened. The question was why. The investigation led them back 7 years, the 2nd of June 1978. On that day, the same aircraft, JA8119, had suffered a tail strike while landing at Osaka. The lower part of the tail scraped along the runway, damaging the rear pressure bulkhead. Boeing, the manufacturer, dispatched a team to Japan to perform the repair. The standard procedure for such damage required a single, continuous splice plate to be fitted over the damaged section, secured with 3 rows of rivets to ensure the load was distributed evenly. But the repair team made a critical error. Instead of one continuous plate, they used two separate plates. One section of the joint was now secured by only a single row of rivets. This improper repair was only about 30% as strong as the original design. With every flight, the cycles of pressurization and depressurization placed immense stress on this weakened joint. Microscopic fatigue cracks began to form, spreading from the single row of rivet holes. For 7 years and over 12,000 flights, this ticking time bomb went undetected. On 12th of August 1985, the weakened metal finally gave way, leading to the catastrophic failure. The aftermath of Flight 123 extended far beyond the wreckage. It triggered a wave of recrimination and accountability that shook both Japan and the United States. The police investigation was exhaustive. The Gunma Prefectural Police recommended that 20 individuals be charged with professional negligence resulting in death, including employees from both Japan Airlines and Boeing. However, in a controversial decision that angered many victims' families, prosecutors decided not to indict any individuals, citing the difficulty in assigning direct personal blame for what was ultimately a systemic failure. No one went to prison for the death of 520 people. Instead, the penalty was paid in money and honor. Japan Airlines paid out staggering 7.8 billion yen, roughly $50 million at the time, condolence money to the families of the victims. Boeing, acknowledging the fault in the repair, agreed to split the cost of compensation, reportedly paying 80% of the settlement. But for some, the cost was far higher than any fine. In Japan's culture of deep personal responsibility, the weight of the disaster was crushing. JAL President Yasumoto Takagi resigned to take responsibility. Tragically, the guilt was too much for others to bear. A JAL maintenance manager at Haneda Airport and a violently criticized engineer involved in the inspection process both took their own lives, adding two more souls to the tragedy's toll. In the wake of this devastation, the aviation industry was forced to change. Boeing and regulatory agencies mandated rigorous inspections of all 747 bulkheads worldwide, uncovering other cracks that had gone unnoticed. Aircraft design philosophy shifted, with new requirements for hydraulic systems to be physically separated, ensuring that a single point of failure in the tail could never again sever all lines of control. The incredible actions of the flight crew, who kept the plane airborne for 32 minutes with no flight controls, were studied intensely. Their desperate use of engine thrust led to new simulator training programs, teaching pilots how to handle situations that were once considered completely unsurvivable. Today, a memorial stands on the lonely mountain ridge, now known as Osutaka no One, a quiet tribute to the 520 lives lost.